Hello, everyone. This is your minister, Reverend Curtis Gatewood. First, I want to thank our hostess, Sister Dr. Prophetess Talithia Denise Barrett, and of course, all of you who are graduating. We want to send you a special congratulations out to all of our graduates. We give honor to the Most High God, the omnipotent God who sent down his only begotten Son, Jesus the Christ, whom, of course, became what I consider my ultimate Messiah and my ultimate liberator for freedom and justice. We want to thank you again for tuning in this week. We're going to have a couple of series or a couple of times where we're going to discuss a devastating matter as it pertains to American history. It is the most unfortunate, saddest, one of the saddest stories of history that you're going to have, other than slavery itself. The fact that we had beautiful ancestors who pulled themselves up by boots that did not even have straps. And they were able to rise up and build what became known as the Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so we want to talk a little bit about that because unfortunately, the destruction and massacre of this beautiful empire born out of descendants of slaves who still, after all they had gone through, they still held their heads high, their backs straight, and they built almost their own nation of businesses, flourishing, top of the line businesses. And racists just not would relent, and they still have not relented. You send us through slavery. You deprive us of our culture, our history. You divide us up. Send some of our siblings to Virginia, some to North Carolina. You've already taken us from our homeland of Africa, where some of us were from great tribes that had thrived and that had contributed so much to civilization. And then we get here and we're broken down to slaves, to nothing, to second-class citizens, less than hogs and dogs. And then after all of that, depriving us of education, depriving us of money and resources, depriving us of everything imaginable that would allow one to survive, after all of that, and we get through, and we finally start without your help, without any loan, without welfare, without anything. People were building themselves up, building great businesses. And you wouldn't let us keep our own businesses that we built in spite of? How low will you go, America? How low will you go? How evil can you be? Anyway, we are here in this sad anniversary time of 100 years after the destruction, the vicious destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district, known as the Black Wall Street. I just don't get it. I just don't get it, America. I just don't get it. As we give honor to God, first we need to understand that God is a God of justice. God also is a God where all things work together. Unfortunately, there's such bad things that would happen to us. But there is this divine belief that somehow all things will work together to produce good. And so, what our message will be about today is, will we be willing to learn from our ugliest and most deadly history? Can we learn from our ugliest and deadliest history? America, can we learn? Black people, can we learn? White people, can we learn? People of color, of various colors and nationalities, can we learn from our ugliest and deadliest history? It's time to learn. Now, much of the reason as to why the Tulsa massacre is so unknown is because there were deliberate efforts to hide this history because it was so ugly. It was so inhumane. It is so dispiriting. And oftentimes white America would attempt to hide Black history when it is so ugly because they fear rebellion, just like in the police departments today. And I'm sure you're aware of the case of Ronald Green and other police reports where the police department will lie about what happened. They were trying to hide the video footage because they feel if we are anything like them, we will want to retaliate and murder everybody responsible. So what God has put into our spirit is that we are going through the hell of oppression. Simultaneously, we are trying to walk uprightly as God would have us to walk. But it's hard. It's hard, God. People are so abusive. People are so mean. People are so evil. Yet we are here trying to walk a righteous walk. And I just want to say to my white counterparts, let us walk in the power of God. Do not disturb this groove. We have a relationship with God that you don't understand. Do not disturb this groove. And what we need to do as a people is learn from our ugliest and deadliest history. Please, Jesus. Please, God. Help us, Lord. Now, let's talk about Tulsa. Wow. It's sad. It's sad. Wow. It's so sad. It makes me want to cry when I think about what happened. The Tulsa Race Massacre, also known as the Tulsa Race Riot, which, as far as I'm concerned, it was not a riot. It was a declaration of war on Black people who were really not armed or ready for a war. It was a massacre. It was a mass murder. It was destruction. In fact, it played out in every detail how Jesus describes Satan who came but to kill and to steal and to destroy. That's what it was. It was an act of Satan. It wasn't a riot. That wasn't a riot. So I'm not going to refer to it as a race riot. It makes you think that someone might have been out to pursue justice or using some form of humanity. There was no humanity in this. It was so ugly until it happened. And so this is why we're going to spend a couple of weeks dealing with this, because it's too much. So I'm not going to take you very long tonight or today. What we want to do is introduce you to what happened. And we're going to go into more detail next week about this massacre that took place in America. Now, An introduction is, of course, it took place on May 31st. That's when it started, but it went through June 1st, 1921. 1921. White mobs from white residents, I guess, working in collaboration with city officials, they attacked Black residents and businesses of what was known and still known as the Greenwood District, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It has been called the single worst incident of racial violence in American history. The attack was carried out on the ground, through the air, through private aircraft. Listen to this, folks. They destroyed more than 35 blocks, 35 square blocks of the district. And this was, at the time, the wealthiest Black community in the United States of America. I repeat, this was the wealthiest Black community in the United States of America. More than 35 blocks, more than 35 blocks were just destroyed by angry, jealous racists. Let's be clear. There was no reason for this. There became some type of disagreement because, of course, it started by a young white lady who worked as a hotel, as an elevator clerk. It was alleged that she was, there was some type of sexual misconduct, allegedly, by a Black man who was on the elevator at the time. And without, of course, this is what they do, without due process, without anything, they wanted to lynch this young Black man. So there were people who were from the district, the Greenwood District, men who stood for justice, who were dignified men. They did not just believe just because a white man said it happened that it was so. And so what they wanted to happen is to make sure that there would be justice provided for this man who had been accused of this misconduct. So whites showed up to lynch the young man. Blacks came to say, no, we're not going to have him lynched without due process. It's only an allegation. He may be innocent, so we're not going to let him die. That was how it started. So arrogant, racist white men at the time decided they were not going to hear from these Black people who stood for justice, and they brought their arms. They came saying, look, we are not going to take another lynching through an allegation. This is how it started. And so at some point, one of the white men tried to take the gun from one of the Black men. And of course, it started, a scuffle started. So when it was all said and done, some people died as a result of this white man trying to take the gun from the man. And so later that evening, whites began to plot. And they decided they were going to do a sneak attack and destroy the entire Black Wall Street. Women, children, innocent men, it did not matter. They rained terror on the entire 35 blocks of success, of Black success. They destroyed it. Bombs from the sky, burnings, guns. White men were deputized, just gave them guns. Look, the so-called law and order, where there had not been any law or order since there was a such thing as so-called law and order in America. There has never been law and order in America. Anyway, the so-called law enforcement gave white men ammunition and guns to go out and commit murder against these successful black people. In fact, there's a 107-year-old woman that's still alive saying she's still hearing the guns and the killings and the crying and the moaning. She's 107 years old. She was 7 years old at the time it took place. So we're going to talk more about some of the details next week. But what I want to do today is just remind America and remind you, first of all, there's no such thing as history that should be hidden. For whatever reason you think that you're supposed to hide history, let me tell you, that is a big mistake. We need to know everything that happened to our people. We need to know everything. Don't feel like you're doing me a favor by hiding information. I will determine whether I'll be angry or not. I will determine whether I will respond violently, cry, peacefully, whatever I decide. You give me the information. It's not for anyone to decide how we're going to respond, so therefore we're not going to give you the information. So years went by. It was not until 1996 where people started actually discussing this, what happened. In 1921, people would not even mention it. It was not even written in the history. It was such an awful thing. Just imagine how many businesses possibly could have grown out of the Black Wall Street. Imagine if we had our own grocery store chain that could have come from that. Our own malls and other things could have come from that foundation of success that was destroyed. And I'm talking about after slavery. What we need to understand is the sad thing about it is it didn't just happen in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Somebody better pray with me. Pray with me, church. It didn't just happen there. Right here in North Carolina. 1898. There was the only and first and only coup d'etat that took place. Again, a successful black community in Wilmington, North Carolina. Again, pulling themselves up from boots that did not have straps. After they've been shamefully degraded, after the ancestors and others who were the children of slaves, and some of those people had actually served as slaves, but they were still wise enough. They had the godly spirit enough. They had the power enough and the sound-mindedness enough and the love for community enough to become productive citizens. They didn't just come out killing. They didn't just come out trying to kill white people. They were about building community and establishing a relationship with God. How can we learn? When will we learn from the ugliest and deadliest history? Why wouldn't America say we are never going to allow such a thing to happen again? So the first thing we're going to do as America, if we're an intelligent and civilized society, you would think people would say, okay, Ku Klux Klan, any organization whose purpose is to murder, degrade, and kill and destroy black people, if you are anywhere in America, we're going to run you out by every means necessary. By military, law enforcement, whatever. If you are in any way in existence here in this country and calling yourself a Ku Klux Klansman or a Confederacy sympathizer or any other white supremacist terrorist group, if you exist, we're going to wipe you off the map. That should have been the first thing, the first lesson that we learned. You don't allow evil to exist, and evil to organize, and evil to gain weaponry and continue recruiting across the country. You don't allow that if you're talking about law and order. So why do we still have the existence of the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups when we know what they did right there in Tulsa, when we know what they did right there in Wilmington, when we know what they did right there in Rosewood? We know what they did right there in Elaine, Arkansas. Why are we allowing these continuous terrorist groups to continue organizing and recruiting when we already have seen the ugliest and the deadliest history? Why? And you know, if they exist, they're going to continue growing. They're going to participate in the workforce. If you have racist, white supremacist terrorists and you allow them to exist when you know how ugly and how dangerous and how deadly they have been, you know they're going to become police officers. You know they're going to work in the areas of health. You know they're going to work in the areas of food. They're going to become a part of the workforce if you allow the existence of such evil. God is a God of justice. Do not say to us, America, that you are Christian, that you are godly, that you have moral principles, if you are continuing to allow the existence of the devilish work that took place in Tulsa in 1921. You have no God in you. That's evil. That's savagery. That's barbaric. It's not civilized. It's not humane. It's nothing human about it. It is evil straight from hell. And if we are going to be about the business of God, we have to protect God's most vulnerable people. You cannot become more vulnerable than coming off a plantation where you've been denied wages, you've been denied education, you've been denied dignity. You cannot be more vulnerable than that. If America is not willing to protect such people, you are headed straight to hell. You are representatives of Satan. You are the disciples of Satan. If you are not willing to stand up and stand for God and say no longer, because we are going to learn from the ugliest and deadliest history in our nation. "100 years it has been since the bombing, the killing of innocent women and children, destroying homes, destroying churches, destroying organizations, destroying every imaginable form of success. America pretends as if they want black folk to be independent and not need welfare, not need handouts. But we have nothing in our history to show that that is the case. Every time black people have taken upon themselves to learn, to strive, and to become great, they're the first assassinated. They're the first lynched. They're the first one who have their homes and their businesses destroyed. So stop lying, America. Stop lying. You don't want black folk to not have to depend on you. You want black folk to depend on you. You want black folk to need welfare. You want black folk to need public housing so you can control it, so you can destroy it, so you can send your carbon monoxide through and your lead poisoning through and all the other pollutants that would kill women and children. You don't want us to be independent. Stop lying. You know we're not looking for a handout. In fact, you don't have anything to hand to us. How can you get a handout when you rob what you got? You can't give a handout to me. You can only give it back. Don't suggest you giving black people a handout if you give them or at least provide some form of governmental assistance. Don't pretend you're giving a handout after all the dirt you've done to black people. You can't hand anything out. It doesn't belong to you. You can only hand it over, give it back. What you've stolen so wickedly and so deadly. Don't insult our intelligence anymore to suggest that black folk want a handout when you destroyed them at every point when they tried to stand up on their own 2 feet, even after your racist slavery and your racist oppression. Stop lying. You racist white men who are walking around here acting as if you got to have 100% of the wealth, 100% of the highest paying jobs, the 100% And if you don't get it, you're crying, talking about reverse discrimination. You haven't been reversely discriminated against. Discrimination is going fast and forward. Stop lying, America. God has sent agents of truth, and God has sent me here to let you know what the truth is. We're going to tell on you about Tulsa. We're going to tell on you about Wilmington. We're going to tell on you about the thousands of lynchings that took place between 1890 and 1940. We're going to tell on you because ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Therefore, I'm going to close by saying we must learn from our ugly history, because God is providing us history as a teachable moment on how ugly we can become. God is providing history so he can he's showing you how important it is to obey his greatest law. He's showing you ugly history, deadly history, so you would never forget, black folk, from whence you came, because he brought you up from bondage, just as he did with the Israelites. And make no mistake about it, we're not going to act as if the Israelites today are the ones that were in bondage that God brought out of bondage. We have oppression that's coming from an Israeli force that's coming down on the Palestinian people today, raining bombs on the Palestinian people today, similar to what we saw in Tulsa. Shame. When will we learn from our ugliest and deadliest history? Therefore, I want to ask you to come out on this coming Saturday as I close. Not this coming Saturday, I'm sorry. On June 5th. Mark your calendars, June 5th. June 5th at 10 o'clock a.m. We're going to be in the McDougal terrorist community at the Burton Park at 10 o'clock a.m. on Saturday, June 5th. Tell somebody, come out. Let's learn how to prevent this ugly history from repeating itself. We do not need the horrific stories being replayed over and over and over again. My God. It's time to wake up. It's time to take religion seriously. It's time to take faith seriously. It's time to believe again that we can win. We are mightier than the most evil force when we are with God. We can win. We can beat you, America, because and when I'm saying beat you, America, I mean beat your racism. I mean beat your oppression. I mean beat your evils of white supremacy. I'm not saying beat anything that you've done right. I'm not saying beat anything that could possibly appear great. I'm saying beat all of the evil. Beat it the hell out of America, because we need to stand and remember the ugliest and deadliest history so we can be better, so that we can love you one another, so that we can love God with all our heart, our mind, and our souls, that we can love our neighbors as ourselves, that we can prove that whenever someone is hungry, we can feed that person. Whenever somebody's sick, we can visit you. When you're in prison unjustly, we can fight for you. We can fight to overturn your wrongful conviction. We can fight to stop it, because guess what? It's the same thing you did to my Jesus. My Jesus, who died upon the cross after he had been brutally mistreated through police misconduct, being whipped all night while in custody. That's police brutality. Prosecutorial misconduct set him up to be made guilty in a kangaroo court. Prosecutorial misconduct, we're experiencing it today. Whipped all night long. He was sentenced to death wrongfully. That's why we need to eradicate the death penalty today. It's unjust. If you can convict a perfect man, you ought to know then you should not be in the business of a death penalty. Why would you repeat your ugliest history? You know you're killing innocent people. Why would you repeat it? Eradicate the death penalty. It was in 2019 that one of the worst presidents on earth, Donald John Trump, had the audacity to be the president to reinstate the federal death penalty. We should be fighting that. We should make sure, because we should not want to repeat the ugliest and deadliest history. Why would you give a government that would allow the bombing in 1921 the opportunity to have a death sentence? Why would you give racist police officers a gun and a badge when you're not doing anything to make sure you are eliminating them from the process by checking their backgrounds and their association with white supremacist groups? Why aren't we learning from the deadliest and ugliest history? That's why God sent me in this ministry, to help to show you the way and to remind you of what happened and connect the dots to the Jesus the Christ that was sent here to tell you what the laws should be, and then how we can come together and righteously protect and save one another so that God would take us to another level that we have not yet seen. I thank you. On next Sunday, please come back. We're going to finish this discussion about Tulsa. Please come back, and we're going to talk about some of the other cities in America that was being beautified, elevated, professionally lifted up, but was destroyed by jealousy and white supremacy and racism. So join us next week. Write down June 5th at 10 o'clock. And we want to make sure that we come together as brothers and sisters. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in. And look, go help somebody. You'll be glad you did. It's going to make you feel better. Love you. God bless you.